Not only is rust super fun to paint, but it helps give extra detail and a sense of scale to your miniatures. I want to show you how to paint weathering and rust on your minis in 3 different ways, each one a little more involved than the previous, while all having their own benefits. Let's get started. To begin, I'm going to give everything a base coat of Citadel's dried brown over a black primer. I like this because it's a neutral to cool leaning brown, which will be nice compared to all the warm, orangish rust colors we're going to apply on top. This is also what's considered a base paint, so make sure you thin it down appropriately because it's pretty thick. For the first shield, I'm just going to take Storm Hose Silver and dry brush it on top. I start with the main details and parts I definitely want to catch, like the edges and the Chaos Star, focusing on a downward direction with my dry brushing. Once I have some coverage there, I move on to the rest of the shield, varying up my angle, but paying attention to leave the bottom half a tad darker. I go slowly, building up a subtle texture until I have coverage I'm happy with. This is a super simple recipe, but the contrast in color gives it a ton of depth. I think it gives a really great burnished silver or antique metal look. This is super suitable for nights or stormcast. Still bright, but with some weathering and a subtle texture to give a scale and a natural look. Also from here, you could add whatever details you want to plus it up, like a wash to deepen the weathering, or maybe some verdigris effects. For the second shield, we're going to go a lot more rust forward. First, we're going to paint on some charred brown in a splotchy manner. We're not being fancy here, just mostly looking to break up the solid dried brown to get a little more interest in our base rust color. From here, I mix some of Citadel's Iron Warriors with Vallejo's Electric Blue. This helps tint the silver a more bluish, cool color, which helps in contrast to all the warm rust. A lot of the steps from here on out in the video are going to be done with this funny stippling brush I have. It's just a normal craft brush that I snipped with clippers after it got a bit gunked up. I really like using this because the frayed bristles help to apply color in small patterns, with tiny dots giving the object a sense of scale. Small marks make more sense for something that's small. This is similar to what you get while using a sponge, but this is reusable and has all the control that a brush does. Using this, I stipple on the blue and metal mixture, avoiding recesses and anywhere else rust might collect. Once I have decent coverage, I switch to a regular brush and tidy up, connecting some of the gaps left behind, especially towards the top of the shield. For this step, I'm also stippling, making sure to create irregular marks and staying small. I also apply some edge highlighting on the more extreme points that are facing up and will catch the light. Then I water down some Doombolt Brown and run it into the recesses and around the raised details like the spikes. To really punch up the rust, I stipple on some Scarlet Gouache with my weird brush, making sure to dab away most of the paint so I can make really small dots and marks. I use this sparingly and towards the bottom where I imagine most of the rust will be. Less is definitely more with this step. I really like doing this style of rust for a lot of applications. The amount of brushwork lets me remain in control, and it's also quick enough to be useful for large squads and heroes alike. Shield 3 uses maybe one of the most fun steps, but before we get to there, I stipple on some Doombolt Brown over the dried bark, and follow this up with Vallejo's Orange Brown. I dab these over the shield until I have a patchwork of colors, trying to get a decent mix of all 3. The next part is a tip I picked up from an Aaron Lovejoy painting class, which I would definitely recommend. Now that we have our rust colors, I sponge on some liquid mask. I'm using the type of sponge you'd find on Pluck Foam for Warhammer storage. There are different brands for masks, but this is the product I'm using. That being said, I'd probably recommend Vallejo or something because, quite frankly, this label terrifies me. I dip my sponge in and apply it to the shield. Most heavily on the bottom, but making sure I get some specks all over, as this will be what makes up the rust pattern. Once I'm done, I hang on to the sponge. This dries mostly clear, and once complete, I paint the same Iron Warriors and Electric Blue mixture onto it. Also, this would be a great time to add a theme color from your army if you're going for a painted metal look. After waiting for everything to dry, you can start to rub the mask away with your finger. Or even better is using the dried sponge you applied it with. It's super cool to see the results once you pull the mask off. To help make the details pop, I just go back in with a final dry brush of Stormhost Silver, focusing on the raised parts like the Chaos Star and ignoring the rest. It looks awesome. I love the tiny marks the sponge makes, really making it believable. The masking can be a little tricky to pull off on smaller things, but this is great for larger sections and especially vehicles, as you can see here with these Defcaups I did. And there you have it, 3 great ways to weather a miniature and paint some rust. Hopefully these can give you some ideas, and even if you already have your own methods, maybe there's a thing or two that seem new and interesting. It's good to remember that these techniques aren't set in stone and are more like tools in your arsenal. Feel free to mix them up and apply elements from one to another. For example, adding some of the watered down Doombolt Brown to Shield 1, or stippling some Stormhost Silver or other metallics onto Shield 2 or 3. Thanks for watching.